Shelly, just wanted to check in with you because we're into December now, and as much as I enjoyed revisiting one of my absolute favorite books of all time, in Fahrenheit 451, and hearing your thoughts and the thoughts of all of our other wonderful friends that joined us in the Eclectic Book Club for our first pick, I'm equally excited to revisit something that it's been so long since I've read it. I don't know that I remember anything beyond the basic ebb and flow of the story that uh, most people would know, and that is the Iliad by Homer. I know it's a revolves around the Battle of Troy, and that there's Achilles and Helen, and the plot of her being abducted, and Agamemnon, and I believe that the gods play a really big role in this. So the gods of the Greek pantheon. Beyond that, I don't remember any of the details of it. And I guess that's what happens when you don't revisit a book for a long, long time. I remember reading it on my own as a teenager. It was never taught to me in school. I read this and the Odyssey on my own as a teenager, and I couldn't tell you the translation, couldn't tell you much about it anymore. And so I'm excited to dive back into it and really solidify the overarching plot of this and some of the bigger characters and what happens throughout the book. And I hope that you are having a good time with it too. I know that you did enjoy our first read with Fahrenheit 451. I hope that when we get to the end of the month, you're able to reflect back and say that you enjoyed this as well. And not only that, that you are excited to go from here into the Odyssey still. I know that that is what we've tossed around as a possible January book, but certainly, uh, if this isn't working well, we wouldn't want to force that. So I know that you and some of the others have had some issues in choosing a translation. And so I would love to hear more on your thoughts on that, on what maybe was giving you issues with the Fagles translation, because no translation is good for everybody. And then how you went about selecting a translation that worked for you and why you went with the one that you chose. So I really look forward to hearing your thoughts on that. And then your thoughts on the opening books. By the time you're making your video on Monday, uh, you'll have read a lot more in this book than where I've read here on Friday. I've read the first 3 books so far out of 24, and so I'm enjoying it. It's a very slow burn to kick things off. Um, it's got a lot of detail and description of the armies that are gathering together on the sides for this big giant conflict, and a little bit of hints of what's happened without any big long narrative of exactly what happened, but enough to piece together why this conflict's going on and what the overarching issue is that's causing all of this. And even in the moments where it's listing lots of different nations that are gathering together, it at least gives them something, each of them something memorable to help them stand out. And so it's not just a long list of a bunch of names and nations and cities, but little tidbits along the way that I think is helpful. And it probably would also have been helpful for somebody reciting this orally, because then you have something to associate with each of those names. That's probably why, if I were to speculate, that they did things like that. And so I've got the Robert Fagles translation, and I'm going to read a part in here that caught my attention towards the end of book 3. So if you have not read that far, by all means, go ahead and stop now, and then come back and finish once you've gotten that far. But this I thought was probably the most interesting scene. It's over very quickly, but it's not only really interesting in terms of the action sequences, but it also shows the direct influence that the Greek gods are going to be playing in this over the course of this book, because I imagine it's not going to deteriorate and lessen from there. So in book 3, this is around verse 380, line 380. I'll start just a little bit before. So this is, the sides are filling together. And so I'm going to start around 358. Now Priam rose in their midst and took his leave. Hear me, Trojans, Achaeans, geared for combat. Home I go to windy Ilium, straight home now. This is more than I can bear, I tell you, to watch my son do battle with Menelaus, loved by the war god, right before my eyes. Zeus knows, no doubt, and every immortal too, which fighter is doomed to end all this in death. So, leading up to this point, they're saying Menelaus and Paris are going to do single combat, and whichever side wins will be the victor of the war, and that there will be peace after this single combat. And laying the victims in the chariot, noble Priam climbed aboard, pulling the reins back taut. Antenor flanked him, mounting the gleaming car, and back they drove again, heading home to Troy. But Priam's son, Prince Hector, and royal Odysseus measured off the ground for single combat first, then dropped 2 stones in a helmet, casting for lots for casting. Who would be first to hurl his bronze-tipped spear? The armies prayed and stretched their hands to the gods. You could hear some Trojan or Achaean pleading, Father Zeus, ruling over us all from Ida, God of greatness, glory. Whoever brought this war on both our countries, let him rot and sink to the house of death, but let our pacts of friendship all hold fast. So they prayed as tall Hector, eyes averted under his flashing helmet, shook the 2 lots hard, and Paris's lot leapt out. The troops sat down by rank, each beside his horses, pawing the ground where blazoned war gear lay. And now one warrior harnessed burnished armor on his back, magnificent Paris, fair-haired Helen's consort. First he wrapped his legs with well-made greaves, fastened behind the heels with silver ankle clasps. Next he strapped a breastplate round his chest, his brother Lycaon's, that fitted him so well. Then over his shoulder Paris slung the sword, the fine bronze blade with its silver-studded hilt, and then the shield strap and his sturdy, massive shield. And over his powerful head he set a well-forged helmet, the horsehair crest atop it tossing, bristling terror. And last he grasped a spear that matched his grip, following step by step the fighting Menelaus, strapped on armor too. Both men armed at opposing sides of the forces, into the no-man's land between the lines they strode, glances menacing, wild excitement seizing all who watched, the stallion breaking Trojans and Argive men-at-arms. Striking a stand in the dueling ground just cleared, they brandished spears at each other, tense with fury. Suddenly Paris hurled, his spear's long shadow flew, and the shaft hit Menelaus's round shield, full center, not pounding through, the brazen point bent back in the tough armor. But his turn next, Menelaus reared with a bronze lance and sent a prayer to Father Zeus. Zeus, King, give me revenge. He wronged me first. Illustrious Paris, crush him under my hand, so even among the men to come a man may shrink from wounding the host who showers him with kindness. Shaking his spear, he hurled, and its long shadow flew, and the shaft hit Paris's round shield, hit full center, straight through the gleaming hide. The heavy weapon drove, ripping down and in through the breastplate, finely worked, tearing the war shirt. Close by Paris's flank it jabbed, but the Trojan swerved aside and dodged black death. So now Menelaus drew his sword with silver studs, and hoisting the weapon high, brought it crashing down on the helmet ridge, but the blade smashed where it struck. Jagged shatters flying. It dropped from Atrides' hand, and the hero cried out, scanning the blank skies, Father Zeus, no god's more deadly than you. Here I thought I'd punish Paris for all his outrage. Now my sword is shattered, right in my hands. Look, my spear flew from my grip for nothing. I never hit him. Lunging at Paris, he grabbed his horsehair crest, swung him round, started to drag him into Argive lines, and now the braided chin strap holding his helmet tight was gouging his soft throat. Paris was choking. strangling. Now he'd have hauled him off in one undying glory, but Aphrodite, Zeus's daughter, quick to the mark, snapped the rawhide strap cut from a bludgeoned ox, and the helmet came off empty in Menelaus's fist. Whirling it round, the fighter sent it flying into his Argives, scrambling fast to retrieve it. Back at his men he sprang and ranged with a brazen spear, mad for the kill, but Aphrodite snatched Paris away. Easy work for a god, wrapped him in swirls of mist, and set him down in his bedroom filled with scent. And that's where I'll end that little reading there. So we see the single combat, and the underdog gets the first throw, and he hits the shield, and the tip bends, and then the big brawny Menelaus gets to throw his, and it breaks through the shield, and it pierces armor and into the underlayer, and it almost is enough to kill Paris, but he just barely turns aside so that it doesn't quite pierce him into his flesh. And he pulls his sword and goes and charges at Paris and swings it and hits him in the helmet, and the sword shatters. Like, what are the odds of that? And then we see the blatant interference by Aphrodite, who cuts the strap of his helmet and then whisks him away into his bedroom in the middle of the fight. So I found that really, really fascinating, really interesting. And I'd be curious to hear how that scene played out in your translation. Did it closely mirror what Figel's described, or is it very, very different? So I hope you're doing well, Shelley. I'm enjoying this. I'm looking forward to getting a couple more books in over the course of the weekend, and just really setting off on this epic that I'm happy to become far more familiar with than I already was. So I appreciate you wanting to have this be our eclectic book pick for December, because I think it's just been a very enriching and rewarding read so far. So thank you so much, Shelley, because who knows how much longer this would have sat on my shelf saying, you should read me again, but I know you won't. So I appreciate that.